But hi, everyone. I'm Hope Bohanec. Thank you for having me. And I love the work that Sailesh Rao and Climate Healers, the whole team, does. I'm honored to be here and help bring about Planet B. So that's a really wonderful. I loved Sailesh's presentation earlier. And I'll just say a little bit about me. I've been vegan for 37 years. I've been doing this work, animal advocacy work, for all that time, for 3 decades. And I used to work with United Poultry Concerns, but now I have my own nonprofit, Compassionate Living, and we have numerous projects. One is the Humane Hoax Project that I'm going to be talking about a little bit. And I also have a podcast. I host a podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast, and I organize 2 large-scale vegan events, the Sonoma County Veg Fest in Santa Rosa, California, and the Eugene Vegan Fest in Eugene, Oregon. I now live in Eugene, Oregon. Okay, so that's just a little about me. So I want to get my slides going here. Let's see. I do have a slide presentation. Oh, I haven't pulled it up yet. Hang on momentarily. Let's get this going. Here we go. All right, let's play from the beginning. All right, there we go. Okay, so I already kind of talked a little about me, host of the Hope for the Animals podcast. And that was a rescue that we did. I don't know if anyone remembers this from long, long ago, the Turlock rescue in the Bay Area many moons ago, pre-pandemic. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 topics today. I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments and thoughts. And I'm going to talk about 3 topics: speciesism, changing our narrative and trajectory as an animal rights community, and my 2 cents about that, and ahimsa, nonviolence, and getting into a spiritual dimension. So there is a common thread with all of these, and they may seem kind of separate, but there's a common thread. So kind of look for that common thread, and maybe in the end I'll ask if you caught the common thread, and I'll help you with that as well. So we'll start with speciesism. Okay, speciesism. So most of the attendees here probably know and have heard of speciesism, but just to give a brief definition, it's an unconscious bias that one species is superior or more important than another. And I also like this thought, kind of turning it around, that anti-speciesism is getting justice over the species barrier, right? Going beyond human rights to all species, which I really love. And, so you can think of speciesism, it's a, just like any other system of structural violence, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, it's all connected, all the same. It's an attitude, ideas, beliefs that one species is dominant over the other. This hierarchy of species, humans being superior to all other species on the planet. And of course, this assumption has created horrific exploitation of animals worldwide. So at its heart, what is vegan? What is vegan? Just kind of at a fundamental level. It's an economic boycott, right? It's an economic boycott of an unsustainable, cruel system. And and we don't talk about it enough as a boycott. I like that. It brings in a social justice kind of ethos, right? But it's so much more, right? We know that vegan is so much broader than that. There's ethical veganism and philosophical veganism and spiritual veganism that we will get into. But I want to propose here with speciesism that it is a social justice issue, right? It's not just a diet. Plant-based is the diet, that kind of is the diet, right? Whole food, plant-based, which is incredibly important as well, that aspect of it. However, when people hear vegan, when they, hear about veganism, what do you think is the first thing they think of? Food, probably, right? First thing they think of is the food. And I want to try to change that. I think that we should try to incorporate the animals more. And the first thing that someone thinks of when they think of vegan should be justice for animals. That's what it should mean to people, right? That's what it means to us. So we've got to start talking about it in that way. And I think that, bringing in that speciesist piece, talking about it as a speciesist issue, that helps, right? And speciesism kind of brings animals into the issue. Okay. How do I advance the slides? Let's see. I thought there was going to be a way to do this easily. I thought just that would do it. But it's not. Let's see. Any ideas, anyone? Unmute and let me know how I advance the slides. I did it before.
Maybe the down arrow?
Oh, the down arrow. Now, down and forward arrow aren't working. It worked on the first one. It did, but for now, it's not for some reason. Let me see. Let me try this. Okay. Got it. I tried something else. So I'll just read this with you. Vegan is a social justice issue, broadening our circle of who deserves compassion. Anti-speciesism disrupts the system of violence and exploitation of non-human animals. And I think that, talking about speciesism, vegan as a social justice issue, I think it can make people a little uncomfortable because there is so many human rights abuses happening right now. I mean, now we're just, unfortunately having such a backlash, a backslide on human rights abuses right and left in the last, 5 to 10 years with immigration and trans rights. I mean, there's so many things happening that I think people feel like, well, we don't want to be insensitive, right? We don't want to be insensitive to human rights issues. And so animal rights should wait in line. It kind of needs to wait in line, right? Let's wait for a better time. We don't want to be insensitive. But I would say that no, we can be sensitive and caring in our presentation of animal rights and present it alongside and in connection with, in community with other oppressions, right? Social justice activists would never tell feminists that they have to wait until, racism is solved, or they wouldn't say to the climate justice activists, we have to wait until we've figured out poverty, right? No, we see it as all connected. We know that all these things feed each other, that supporting one helps another. And animal rights, veganism, is absolutely part of that tapestry, right? It's part of that same systematic violence and injustice. So why is it that oftentimes animal rights is seen as just something, not as important, or we shouldn't talk about that, right? If it's even seen as justice work at all? Why? Speciesism, humans of all kinds, even compassionate, progressive, caring people fall into this cultural trap, this unconscious bias of human superiority. So I think we need to call it out. We need to name it. We need to be aware of its pervasiveness in society. And we now have the opportunity to broaden our circle of compassion, to replace these old paradigms that have kept life subjugated on this planet for too long. I think animal advocates, we need to see ourselves as allies to all other social justice issues and movements, broadening our circle of who deserves compassion, because it's time, right, to uncover the injustice of treating someone cruelly, taking away their agency, killing them for profit, just because that someone is another species. All right, so I would really love to encourage, I'm going to wrap up this kind of speciesist section, and we're going to move into something else, but I want to encourage you to check out organizations that are doing this work of connecting social justice and animal rights: Apex Advocacy, Food Empowerment Project, Afro Vegan Society, doing wonderful work. There's more. It's, this isn't the only one. These aren't the only ones doing this work, but just wanted to give them a shout out. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second piece of this thread that I'm weaving here, and that is the trajectory and narrative around animal rights. Okay, and kind of our trajectory of the last maybe 10 or so years. So I have written two books on what I call the humane hoax. I think I've given a presentation on the humane hoax possibly at this conference in the past. So I think most people will know what I'm talking about. But I'll just give a quick definition, and that is the new labeling and marketing of animal products that conveys a false sense that there is some improvement in the industry, either ethically or environmentally. So, humane washing, greenwashing, that's all the humane hoax. And that's the consumer side, right? That's the consumer side. And what I do the most of my work around, what I have podcast episodes about, and we do webinars with our Humane Hoax Project, getting people to understand that these labels are unregulated and that they are just lying to you, and right, that these labels mean very little. But there's another emerging side to this that I want to start talking about more. We've been talking about it a little bit within our Humane Hoax Project volunteer team and wanting to do more on this. And that is that we have now become a movement of welfare reforms. And it's kind of happened slowly over the last 10 years or so that we have really shifted our focus to a heavy engagement with welfare reforms. And, I'll just say right here, I'll give a little disclaimer. Nobody knows, because we're going to get into strategies and tactics, in my opinion, about that. And nobody knows, what's really going to work, right? We're all making educated guesses. We have passionate feelings about it. But just to give a little bit of background on me, I've been in this movement for over 30 years. I have been working all sides of this movement. I was back in the 90s involved in very, radical direct action, disruptions, getting arrested 14 times in the 90s. And then I swung in the early 2000s to the welfare side, to the legislative side. And I was one of the very first I was the campaigns coordinator for Proposition 2, which was one of the very, very first. It was for the Sonoma County, not the whole of California, for the Sonoma County Proposition 2 effort. And it was, really the very first cage-free effort, a legislative attempt. So anyway, I've been, and now I've come to the middle in vegan education, but I've been working all sides of this. So I've seen all sides of this and been thinking about this deeply. I do study, social movements. So I'm giving my educated opinion about all this. So I feel that the trajectory that we have been on in the last 10 or so years is creating is making our ecology, our movement ecology, out of balance. Okay, we are getting really more and more heavy on welfare reforms, and and I'll also say that I don't think that welfare reform shouldn't exist. I think to have a balanced and healthy movement ecosystem, you have to have a diversity of tactics, and we want a lot of things going on. So I don't, necessarily think that we shouldn't have welfare campaigns. I think it should be on a case-by-case basis, and I'm going to talk a little about that. But my concern and my proposal and what I'm concerned about today is, this is my critique, right, is that what happens when we focus on welfare in excess, when like 90% of our movement resources and donations and grant money and jobs and energy and time is all going to welfare efforts. I feel that this approach can risk reinforcing the narrative that the problem is how we treat animals, right? How we treat the animals, and how they're treated and killed, instead of should we be commodifying them at all, right? When we work on cage-free campaigns or other reforms, we're asking the question, how can this be done better? But we know that animals are complex, unique individuals We want to challenge the commodification altogether of these individuals. And so we should be encouraging people to ask, should we be doing this at all? Right? And that's not happening as much. Now, another disclaimer, I totally understand working on these issues. There's a lot of the movement, a lot of vegans, a lot of passionate vegans working on these issues. And there's also within that welfare box, basket of rocks over there, a lot of things going on. There is litigation and legislation and, cage-free, better chicken commitment, all these kinds of different campaignings going on. And I think some are better than others. Some have some merit. But all are kind of the inside game, right? Working with the industry to change. So anyway, and I don't think that people realize that maybe don't work for an animal rights organization or aren't in that world, how heavily we have shifted to having all of our resources going to welfare reforms. I'm on an email list that is kind of an insider animal rights email list that has like the big organizations and the big money and the big donors and, listings of people looking for executive directors and all that stuff. And the majority of emails that come in are, cage-free, victory, 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 cage-free, 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 and then a better chicken commitment, and then cage-free, 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 all over the world. And we've reached, we've gotten our advocacy all over the world, which is wonderful. I'm grateful that there's so many places now all over the world that are working on campaigns. However, the majority seem to be these cage-free and welfare campaigns. And so I'm going to get a little more into why I feel that we shouldn't have so much emphasis on this. Okay, so changing our farming methods, passing legislation, all these things. There's numerous issues for problem of this being our primary focus, and one is that they're easily reversible, right? There are federal bills that have been trying to get through. One is about to really trying to make its way through, the SOS, the Save Our Bacon bill, right? These bills, and they keep coming, They're going to get one of these through. If it's passed, it would wipe out all of the other hard-fought welfare bills that we've been doing for 20 years. Right, to just get a little bit of a modicum of improvement, and some even aren't that much improvement. But a lot of activist time and energy went into these welfare reforms that could just be wiped away, right? But changing our culture, changing our attitudes and beliefs, that has a much more permanent, much longer lasting effect, right? Reforms are a Band-Aid. They're easily reversible. Reforms address the symptoms, but veganism addresses the cause. So the question needs to be, I think, what should be central? What should be the overarching message? And what should just be supportive tactics, right? And I think we have that upside down right now. We have that upside down. Vegan education, grassroots organizing, mass mobilization, focusing on total animal freedom needs to have a much bigger role than it currently does. And reforms really should just be a supportive, tactic tool, a supportive tool. And the overarching message needs to be animal freedom. There was a recent article from Project Phoenix. If anyone isn't familiar with Project Phoenix, I really want to introduce you to them. They're out of the UK. Layla Kassam, she used to be with Animal Think Tank, and she just started Project Phoenix with a couple others. And they're doing some really interesting work on these issues that I'm kind of talking about here. And they had a recent article that was really, really impressive. And it asked, is this a technical problem? Or is it a social injustice, right? And this is a quote from that article. How we frame a reform shapes whether animal exploitation is understood as a technical problem that can be fixed or a social injustice to be ended, right? So when we focus on animals the way they're bred, when we talk about our, the animal agriculture industry or any animal abuse, when we focus on how they're bred, how they're confined, how they're killed, reform seems like a way we can solve that problem, right? You can seemingly end the suffering within the system. No cages, more humane handling. But we all know, even the people that work on these reforms know that there's cruelty beyond the cage, right? There is cruelty whenever someone is commodified. So technical improvements, reforms, they don't ultimately end the exploitation. That is not the trajectory that they're on. They may reduce some suffering, but they also risk legitimizing the system as something to be managed and improved and, rather than challenged and eventually ended, right? So an industry, this is from that article, a quote from that article, an industry that looks like it's solving its own problems rarely gets asked to stop what it's doing, right? A corporation celebrated for recycling waste, that often obscures the fact that they're producing the waste in the first place, right? So similarly, welfare labels claim that, they claim to improve these industry problems when in fact animals are still being confined and killed and mutilated. So we need to be careful when we talk about animal suffering, which has been the primary message, that the primary way we talk about animals and animal rights and these issues is talking about their suffering and what they endure, right? And that is important too, but we have to be careful and kind of try to frame it more broadly as a problem of social injustice, a violation of society's values, of the animals' most basic, needs and instincts, and interests. Framing in the speciesist lens, right, then the commodification of the animals' bodies becomes the problem. And the only way to solve that is to end it. Okay. So another point that I want to make with all this is that I feel that this industry is unreformable. Unreformable. Welfare reforms are reforms, right? And the animal agriculture industry is unreformable because there is no industry without exploiting animals' bodies. How can that be reformed? There's no endpoint where you can ever truly have humane meat, dairy, and eggs. We know this. But that's the consumers don't, and that's what they're hoping for, right? So we're falsely implying that there's some ideal endpoint, this humane meat, dairy, and eggs, where you can have your animal products, but that's not the case. We all know that. So it's the strategy of welfare reforms, it can embolden the industry, making animal products more attractive and taking us even further away from animal liberation. It's if it was so bad for the industry, why would they be so willing to go along with it? Why are they changing right and left to go to cage free? Well, it's because there's a whole different market. They can charge higher prices, tap into a sympathetic consumer, right? And lock it in for the long term. So, they have these empirical data points like the number of animals out of cages, the amount of inches space more than animals have. So it looks like there's these improvements, but are we maybe helping the industry, the very industry that exploits the animals, to just sell more products, to quell consumers' concerns? That's the humane hoax. So some industries are unreformable, like the fossil fuel industry is a good example, right? You can't have a planet-friendly fossil fuel industry. You just can't, right? Well, similar to animal agriculture, there is no industry without harm to animals. So these industries are unreformable and need to be dismantled and replaced. And any collaboration that should be happening with animal agriculture with the industry should really be to support them to get out of animal farming, right? Transitioning to plant farming, getting out altogether. That should be the only partnerships, the only support, the only collaboration that should be happening. And then, the only incremental, I'm going to go to the next slide for this thought. So at this point, people might be saying, but wait. You have to have small steps. You can't just think everybody's going to go vegan overnight, right? You've got to have small steps. I agree. Absolutely. We need incremental change, but where do those steps lead? And you really need to look at each campaign or progress or project with the trajectory of where it's going and where it's going to lead us. The only incremental change should really be to wean off of animal products, reduce animal products, replace with plant-based food. There are good campaigns out there that are making small steps and doing this work. Paige was just mentioning the plant-based treaty. Work like that is absolutely good incremental change. So it's all kind of case by case, and you have to look at it individually. So there's this interesting academic study I wanted to mention. It's called, it was from the Journal of Environmental and Economic Policy. And it was called Animal Welfare Labeled Meat is Not a Stepping Stone to Animal-Free Diets. So they asked consumers about their animal product choices and different welfare labels. And they made the conclusion, this is in their abstract, they said, the survey shows very weak and mixed evidence that the introduction of animal welfare labels could be counterproductive for animal welfare. In the long run, it could result in a locked-in equilibrium with a less harmful social norm, i.e. a suboptimal state of animal farming that still contains animal suffering. And I think that locked in is really key, right? That's what these welfare reforms do. They create a situation where there can be animal exploitation in the long run. That's what the industry is banking on. That's what the industry is hoping for, right? So why are we assisting with that? Okay, so back to that article from Project Phoenix. They had this wonderful strategic test that you can do to kind of analyze a reform or a campaign. And I'll read this whole thing with you. So 4 questions can help answer whether a reform campaign or demand is strategic and likely to weaken the animal factory system or unintentionally strengthening it. Okay, number 1, scale. Does it reduce how many animals are bred, used, and killed? Does it stop expansion or keep animals out of the system entirely? And this is kind of similar to what I have said. What I've been saying is, you got to look at the trajectory. You have to look at where it's going. Is it leading us on the path of animal liberation, of no animal suffering, or is it just taking us down a different path? Legitimacy. Does it expose the violence and injustice inherent in the system? Does it make the industry harder to defend in public? Key there. Okay, story. Does it frame animals trapped in the system as complex individuals, denied dignity and freedom? Does it encourage the public to ask, should this be happening? And how can we move beyond it? And movement power. Does it build organized pressure that outlasts a campaign and strengthens the movement's ability to act again? Okay, so I highly encourage you to read that article, and I'll try and drop a link in the chat at the end of this to that article because it's really, really good. But wrapping up this section, what do we need? What do we need? We need transformational change, right? We have to change who we are, not just what we do, not just habits. We've got to change our hearts, not just our habits. And that's, I think, so key to making lasting change. My concern is that, if we're just focused on the food, if we're just focused on getting people to eat the veggie burger, which is good. I mean, that's part of it. But without the meaning behind the action, without the concept of speciesism, without feeling that animals are individuals worthy of our protection and not being commodified, I feel that we're just going to slip back from any progress we've made if it's just about habits and not about us, who we are as a people, what we care about, right? So we've got to establish this cultural shift in our relationship to animals to maintain the gains that we have made, and we need to dismantle the animal agricultural industrial complex, not work with them, not help promote them, but dismantle them. So how can we do that? Well, we've got to lift up the grassroots. If you study social movements and movement ecology, social strategy, this is a really key part to culture change, is that grassroots vegan education piece that we are really lacking right now because we're putting so much money somewhere else that I just mentioned. So grassroots vegan education, mass mobilization, protests, presentations, webinars, podcasts, webinars like this, like we're doing right now. This is so critical to that deep, lasting cultural change. And, we've got to keep it in the speciesist lens, focus on the intrinsic worth of individual animals. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this part up because I do want to talk about the last piece, which is the spiritual. But I will give a quick plug for my podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast. This is an episode where I talk about this aspect of strategy and social change, or movements change, that trajectory and narrative change. That's what I'm trying to say, that I've just been talking about. So it's called the Cage-Free Conundrum. I get into some more interesting aspects of this that I didn't put in this presentation, but around EA, effective altruism, and kind of the funding that's happening right now is all a huge part of this issue. So if you're interested in learning more about it, I encourage you to check out this episode of my podcast. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I'm going to talk about ahimsa, nonviolence. And this is bringing in the spiritual piece, okay? And this is very important to me. I have, I'll give my personal in a minute, but just so we know what we're talking about here. So we need a fundamental societal consciousness shift, nonviolence at the core of creating the world that we want to see. So we started this presentation with a concept that I think we need to talk more about, and that's speciesism. And I want to end with a concept that I feel we also need to bring into the conversation more, especially around spiritual circles, and that is ahimsa, nonviolence. So this is a Sanskrit word. Himsa means harm. The A before it negates it, so non-harming, non-violence. But really, you can think about it more as a presence of dynamic compassion, like active dynamic compassion in all that we do, in our actions, in our thoughts, in our words. And so, all three Dharma traditions have this very central to their teachings. Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, they all really embrace ahimsa. And the vegan community has really been embracing this word too, right? You see it on necklaces and T-shirts at Veg Fest and stuff. And I think it's beautiful that we kind of are recognizing this concept. And there's really no Western word or translation for it. And I think that's why the vegan community has really picked up on it, right? That it seems so connected to what we're doing. But I just want to give some, a brief overview, bring a little depth to it. And one thing that I do want to emphasize, though, is that ahimsa is not translated as vegan. It is a much broader concept of nonviolence. The words are not really interchangeable, but they complement each other. So I want to talk about three concepts here: dharma, karma, and ahimsa. Just briefly, all the three Dharma traditions have these concepts in their philosophies. And we'll start with dharma. And on the macro, you can think of dharma as kind of like the harmonious flow of the universe, like how we should be living our lives, where we would bring about planet B, right? If we could get in a dharmic flow, then that would lead us to that beautiful paradise of planet B. But right now we are adharmic, adharmic. When we put that A and negate it, adharmic, then we are blocking that flow, out of sync, in turmoil, right? So you can also think of dharma on a societal level and on a community level, and then you get into kind of dharmic laws. I'm not going to get into that. But then getting into the micro of Dharma and kind of our personal ethical code, right? You can think about this as kind of our purpose in life, what we were born to do. That's our swadharma, what we were born to do. How can we live in connection and harmony, right, with what we do in our lives? And I've always resonated with this concept with Swadharma when I was a very little girl. When people would ask what you want to do when you grow up, I would always say I wanted to help animals. I want to work for animals. And, my mom said I said that when I was really, really young. And I remember saying it. And so I feel that this is the path that I was put on this planet to do. And that feels really good, like I'm fulfilling my purpose. So it's really a cool concept, right? What is our swadharma? What were we put here to do? It's a very, very beautiful concept. Anyway, this is just the cliff notes of dharma. There's so much more, but we're going to move on to karma. So karma is a word that we're much more familiar with in the West, right? I think everybody can kind of agree with the concept of what you put out into the world, what you do, comes back to you, right? Action, reaction. That's karma. But it's so much broader than that. There's so much more to it than that. That just kind of is scratching the surface. You can kind of think about it as like a cosmic justice, right? Cosmic justice. That the whole world, when there's actions, there's going to be reactions. And what we do as a society, as a community, individually, it comes back, right? So we are kind of reaping right now what we have sown in the harm that we've done to animals, to the planet, and now it is coming back, right? In climate change, in so many ways, in our pollution, in our disharmony, in our human interaction, everything. So this is karma, right? This is karma. So what can we do? Oh, and this is interesting too, though, that the concept of karma and eating animals is throughout the literature of the three Dharma traditions. It's said over and over again that killing and eating animals is the worst thing that you can do. It's so beautifully stated in so many ways. There's shastras that'll say things like, if you harm an animal, however many hairs or feathers on that animal's body that you cause suffering, you will be reborn and suffer that many lifetimes. Really, really powerful action and reaction, right? So what can we do? How can we cause less harm, right? Okay, we're back to ahimsa, living nonviolently, living in harmony, nonviolence with all of this planet. So in all the Dharma traditions, often ahimsa is the number one guiding principle, the very first vow that you take. There's numerous so when you practice ahimsa, and there's numerous references, as I was going to say, to ahimsa and vegetarianism throughout the literature. So when you practice ahimsa, nonviolence, and you have good karma for yourself, that brings good dharma to the community, right? Goes out into the world, brings harmony and peace to the planet. It's all so connected. It all feels and seems so easy, but it's not, right? We know it is not. It's not easy. And that's why there's so much literature to go through and so much to explore in these traditions. But this all just, I'll wrap up soon, but this all really just helps to heal me. When I was an atheist, I was really angry. I was pissed off. I was so frustrated with all the suffering. It felt like it was just so unjust and had no meaning, and it was very, very, it was frustrating me, a bad way to live. And when I started learning about all this stuff in the Dharma traditions, my husband, I'll mention my husband, Kojin Bohanec, who he and I have been studying particularly Hinduism and Jainism for decades now. And he brought this world into my life and opened me up to it. And it was so beautiful. It just made me, I don't know, feel a lot more like, I was seeking something deeper, like I wanted to see a deeper connection uh, and believe that I didn't want to believe that the suffering was just so random. And this helps you to kind of put it in perspective, know that there is meaning and growth behind all this, right? It's really beautiful. Really helped me to start making sense of things and help me move past my anger and be more accepting. I'll also say that I don't feel that I think that's, it was my personal experience with atheism. I'm sure there's lots of people that can live very healthy and happy and well-adjusted lives being atheists. You don't necessarily need religion or spirituality. This is not something that I am saying is necessary for the change. I think we can also make changes through philosophy and ethics, but for me and for a lot of people, I think that this is a guiding path, right? It's a helpful way of bringing us to planet B, right? Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with this last slide here. Oh wait, one more thing I wanted to say quick is veganism is like taking a vow, right? And Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, they recognize this taking vows, right? So when you start down a yogic path, like in Hinduism or Jainism, you take vows. In Hinduism, it's the yamas. The five yamas are kind of the first vows. Ahimsa is the very first one. In Jainism, it's the vratas. You take vows, vratas. In Jainism, and the very first one is ahimsa, right? So there's this beautiful kind of overlap with veganism and taking a vow of nonviolence, and it's really recognized. They like, I see you. Jane's like, I see you taking that ahimsa vow. Okay. And last quote that I'll read this with us all, but this top part, ahimsa paramo dharma. So ahimsa, nonviolence. Now you know dharma a little bit, right? Kind of the flow of the universe. So ahimsa paramo is the greatest or the best or the biggest or the most important, right? So nonviolence is the most important way we bring about harmony in the universe. It's kind of the ethical imperative, right, of any situation is ahimsa, nonviolence. Okay, I'll read this with you. All living beings are souls, alive and conscious, just like me. As I like to be happy and do not like to be in pain, all living beings like to be happy and do not like to be in pain. By keeping this insight at the core of my being, I will not cause any harm or pain or loss of life to any living being. All right, that's from a Jain Yoga Shastra. So what was the common thread? Remember I said there was a common thread, even though these things are going to feel very separate, right? Speciesism, changing our narrative in the animal rights to more of a broad non-exploitation of animals altogether, and ahimsa, nonviolence. What's the common thread, right? I hope you got it. I hope it makes sense, maybe. But I'll give it to you here. So the common thread is that I believe that we need deep societal consciousness shift to be able to make any of the changes that we want to see. It starts with ourselves. It starts in our community. And we need to change who we are and not just what we do. We need to change our hearts and not just our habits. So that's the kind of common thread through it all. Okay, I'll give another plug for my podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast. Please check it out. I have a backlog of 140 episodes now that you can check out on all the things that I've talked about today and more with wonderful guests. And here's my information, and I'll just stop sharing. Well, if I stop sharing, this may go away altogether. But I don't know if this can be left up somehow and us have it. I don't know if that'll work. But anyway, maybe I'll drop some of this into the chat because I know I want to give the next bit of time for Q&A. So I'll just stop sharing. And if you want my information, I'm sure we can get it to you somehow. Thank you all. So, are there any questions, thoughts on any of it? There was a lot, I know. It was kind of all over the place, but there was that common thread. But it's just three things that I feel very passionate about, and I felt like trying to bring them together for you today.
Thank you very much for that talk, Hope. I'm sure there's loads of questions. So we've got Swen Faulty. I hope I pronounced that right. Would you like to turn on your camera? You can come on and ask your question. What's your question?
Hi, yeah, it wasn't so much a question, but yeah, more of an observation. I was thinking the common thread is that all those things are basically just thoughts in our head. And as humans, we can change our thoughts. We can change the way we react to the thoughts that come up. And that's the power we all have within us. And that gives me hope that people can change. Yeah, so great. But thanks for the presentation. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for that. James Frieden, would you like to turn your camera on, please?
Okay, you're on.
Hi. Here we are again. Professor Erwin Shanda of the University of Montreal told me that Eastern religions tend to minimize the difference between humans and other animals, and the Western ones tend to maximize the space. Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that the Abrahamic religions were born in the desert and the Eastern traditions were born in a gentler climate?
Wow, that's interesting. I've honestly never thought of that, so I don't know that I can really address that.
That's okay.
But I will say that, I was raised Southern Baptist, born again Christian, and very, very strictly Southern Baptist. And my grandmother used to tell me, because I loved animals when I was a child. I was very connected to animals. I had pictures of animals on my, I just loved animals. And I'd say that I wanted to help animals. And my grandmother used to say, she'd say, "Oh, that's sweet, honey. Remember, animals don't have souls, though. Animals, she'd kind of downplay, like animals just aren't as important as humans.
Right.
Maybe care more about humans, And I remember thinking, even at 8 years old, thinking, Grandmama, I think you're wrong. I think they have souls. I see it, and so I went atheist because I thought that's all there was of religion. But then when the Dharma traditions were introduced to me, I was like, okay, this is how religion can be and is to me, that it resonated with me so much more that they saw all life as interconnected, all life as having a worth and souls, and that you can reincarnate into other animals, trees, plant, whatever, that we're all so interdependent and interconnected. And that's why I love the Dharma traditions so much. So,
May I? Sorry, go ahead.
We have another comment. We're really two people.
Yes.
What strikes me about veganism is that it's fundamentally compassion. It's not just a boycott, but what it does for me is it releases joy. It releases much more joy than any other thing in my life. It's along with my family and my profession and all that stuff, but it's just a tremendous source of joy. And I think we need to stress that. I think we need to talk about it. Because it just is really true. And it's very hard for people who don't have it, who don't feel it, to understand it. So I don't know yet how to bridge that gap.
It's tapping into that Swadharma. That purpose in life, the purpose, the reason for you being here brings you into harmony and joy with yourself, like making you feel like you are, doing what you're supposed to do and feeling that happiness, right? Yeah.
Hope, just to thread in here to the comment and the link to the Abrahamic religions and compassion. I come also from the Dharmic background as well, but within the Dharmic background, where I go and listen to the philosophy on the Vedas and Gitas, the person I listen to has mentioned many a times that there's a lot of times the religion gets filled with tradition, and tradition's got nothing to do with the actual principle of the religion, and so it becomes part of religion, which is never really a part of it at all. I think Christspiracy, a documentary that was also done by one of our team members, they do believe they do touch on Christ was vegetarian, and he was trying to protect the animals. We also have so one of the things that I came across, I still have to find a proper reference for it, was that during the halal, one of the halal rich ways of eating that came about due to circumstance, it somehow got embedded as a religion thing. But it was a time where there was a famine and people were hungry and the climate was not comfortable, it was cold, so they had to eat the animals. They asked, Mom, can we eat? They said you have to drain the blood first because it might be infected, so you consume it, so it's but they had to take permission for it. And there's also a lot of things within the Abrahamic Jewish religion. You can't mix dairy and meat.
Right.
So why is that? So there's a conscious thing. Easter, you're not allowed to eat meat. So there is something about it, but where's it blurred? We're not sure. So I think sometimes traditions get mixed in with like the intent of, the wisdom that was created, maybe. But just to thread in there, because that's something that doesn't separate from the unity behind the messengers that have tried to bring people up. That's just a thought since you're on the conversation. We've got Nancy, we've got Danielle, and we've got Naga. We've got 8 minutes, so if we could get through them, that'd be great. Thank you for your comments. Nancy, Kogel? Hello. Could you unmute?
Unmute. Nope. Try it again.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you all for your work, and thank you, Hope. I love that your name is Hope for the animals. It's such a great combination. And I also want to applaud you and thank you for presenting it in that way in which social justice, animal rights justice, animal liberation are they're a synthesis of what we need to do. And I did write this book, Unified Field of Compassion, the revolutionary synthesis between consciousness, veganism, and animal liberation. And I feel like it is so crucial that we accept and move forward on that idea that if we have an idea of hierarchy, well, white is better than black, or any color, or male is better than female, or native born is better than any other place born, and humans are better than non-human animals. It's really the same mindset of hierarchy and the ability for some to dominate or feel better than. And it's one mindset, it's one consciousness, which is really love. And that's how I live in Harlem. So we are multi-everything. We are half Black, half African-American, rather, half Hispanic, and a few of us Caucasian and Indian and Indigenous. So that message really does resonate. I always encourage people to stay abreast of the news of what's happening with our sister brother humans, so we can relate to people in a more fundamental way. And once again, thank you so much.
Did you have a question for me? No. It's okay.
That's
okay. We've got a lot of folks.
Okay. Yeah, just your reaction to that in terms of staying abreast of all the other developments in our world, and even communicating with people on the left or spiritual people to make that combination, that synthesis.
Hmm.
All right.
That's
Thank you,
great.
Nancy.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
Great. So Danielle and then Nahari. So we could keep it brief, but that'd be great. If questions come along, would you like to come on?
Hey, Hope. Nice to actually see you. I do listen to your podcasts. I love them. So thanks for those. You bring up a good point. It's internal work. It isn't external work. I can go buy a Beyond Burger because it's available. That's external. The resilience or the sustainability is going to come from my believing that justice is due to all living things and beings. So it's getting people to go there, which reminds me of an interview you had with Matthew Haltman. And he talked about his new book, but he talked about how coming to, let's say, coming to being a vegan, or the vegan, going vegan, or being vegan for people and trying to grow that is really about how do we connect with people on an internal level with love and doing more, if you will, loving things, right?
Yeah.
Great.
I love bringing love into it. I don't do that enough. You're right. We've got.
Well, I think you do. Well, first of all, you had him as your guest, and I think that you had that real sync with him, and your heart's there anyway.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Danielle.
you.
Nahari, can we get your question, please, before the next speaker? Because we're at the top of the hour. Thank you, Danielle. Do unmute.
Hi, Hope. Thank you for such a beautiful session. I have a question. You talked about welfare activities versus grassroots movement, right? So, as an activist, of course, I am pro grassroots and pro activism, but at the same time, I'm also working as a professional for food system change. So there, I often meet organizations or people who are working in welfare activities. So practically speaking, of course, their cause is also fine. I mean, and it is doable by different agriculturists. But if we talk from an activist point of view, it doesn't seem right. So how do you think that we should, as an activist plus animal lover plus a professional in food system change area, should handle this situation?
Well, I mean, as I said, I do believe that we need a diversity of tactics and strategies in our activist ecology. My concern is with the being out of balance and the emphasis now, and money and resources and everything going towards the welfare. That is my concern. And so wanting to build up the grassroots. But as far as, individual work with like food systems change and things like that, looking at each one on a case by case basis, and does it lead us in the direction of animal liberation, of less animals used, that kind of thing. And those would be the things to work on, as I said. So I think everything should be on a case by case basis as to where we put our time, our energy. If we are wanting to donate to an organization or volunteer for an organization, look at what all their campaigns and what they're doing, and make sure that they are leading in that trajectory of that. And you can use that strategic analysis that I had up from Project Phoenix to do that. So. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Lovely presentation. Thank you very, very much. And we've got a couple of more questions. I think Toby must have it from another source. We literally are at the top of the hour. Is it going to be quick, Toby? Maybe we can squeeze it in.
Sure. Hello. Yes, it's just a comment. It's a comment by James Frieden. To paraphrase Stephen Wise, chimpanzee rights are for chimpanzees. Each group merits rights according to their lives and being. In reality, the first right for all of us animals would be the freedom from murder, torture, close confinement, family fracture, etc. Then humans have human-specific rights, or positive entitlements. Women, for example, should have safe and compassionate births. Children have specific basic needs: voting, education, safely built outhousing, domestic policies, etc. Animals need less, but need the fundamental rights urgently.
Thank you
That's
for
it.
that. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hope. And thank you very much for everyone that participated, contributed, and their questions. And how can they reach you? Is there, you shared the presentation?
If I have access to the chat, I'll drop in some links in the chat. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
The earth is calling soft and clear, not with judgment, not through fear. She whispers through the wind and trees, remember who you're meant to be. We are not divided souls, but living parts of greater wholes. Every heart, every nation holds a piece of worldwide resolution. We have remedies beyond survival, beyond the stories of denial. 1,000 pathways join as one. The healing has already begun. We have the remedy for compassion revolution, peaceful collaboration, a worldwide resolution. Loving guidance lights the way. Hope for humanity begins today. With loving kindness, hand in hand, together we restore the land. True nature lives in every seed, in every generous word and deed. The rivers, forests, skies and seas reflect the peace we choose to breathe. Spiritual embodiment, a living sacred testament, not escaping from this earth, but honoring her endless work. Sacred restoration, hearing every generation. The birthright to existing in freedom, shared by every life beneath the sun. Beyond our borders, beyond our names, love burns brighter than our blame. From every culture, every shore, we discover what we're living